What is up? What is up? What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Protect Our Queens podcast presented by the Give Us a Shot Network. Once again, with me, as always, my brother in Christ, my partner in women's basketball crime, the one and only Martin Sories. My man, how we feeling today?
We're feeling great. Great night to be alive. We're back in action. If you don't like women's basketball, this is definitely not the place for you. We are excited to getting ready for our 1 year show coming up in a few weeks. Some good stuff happening. We're going to be talking about some interesting stuff tonight. What do we got? What do we got planned for tonight, Dwayne Marcus?
The tiers are back for the penultimate, second to last time of the regular season. The tiers are back. Excited for that. This is actually the first time leading into the tiers that I didn't talk to Martin at all or hint to Martin at all about what they're going to look like. Probably since the first one that I did. So that'll be, I'm very excited to see how he's been feeling. I was fully prepared to give a eulogy for my aces tonight, but it looks like things are okay. I've got some interesting things I want to talk about the aces. And the MVP conversation after the break, as it always does, has heated up in ways that has both pissed me off and confuzzled me. So Martin and I are going to talk about that as well. And we will also introduce, because we have it official, we will introduce, or not introduce, but announce who our guest for next week's show will be at the tail end of tonight's show. So stay tuned to the very end for that as well. There's a lot to talk about, as always. There's not a lot of time to get into it. So we are going to hit the intro and have some fun.
Protect our queens.
No matter what it takes, we must protect our queen.
I just love playing the game. It's fun.
I'm reacting on what the defender does.
I hit them with a hezzy. After that, they quit.
Yeah, I think I've always just been able to get downhill. So I've sort of prided myself on that.
I know what I'm doing. Like, people can't tell me I'm not doing the right, I've been taught the right way.
As always, Martin Sories, we start off with some good old-fashioned what's new POQ. Just for anyone who might have been living under the rock the past week or so. What you got, Martin? What's some stuff that's been going on in the world of women's basketball that's been catching your eye lately?
A lot going on for sure. Once again, much love to anyone who's watching live. If you're tapped in on the Basketball Society YouTube channel, welcome. If you're on Give Us a Shot, welcome. Make sure to leave comments, any thoughts or takes that you have, comments, reactions, or anything like that. Make sure you leave them if you're watching live. And if you're watching on the playback, much love to you as well. Yeah, there's a lot going on. A lot of stuff happened. I got a few things here in the world of women's basketball that happened that I think were noteworthy. We had Maya Moore's jersey retirement, which was really dope to see.
Absolutely.
It was also great that Minnesota got a win in that game against the Fever. That was nice for them. Nafisa went for 31. She had a big game. I didn't know. I saw after the fact that Nafisa is from the same town in Missouri as Maya Moore. They're from the same town. Yeah. And so, yeah, that was good for them. But yeah, really cool to see Maya Moore out there, and also reminding us yet again that she has no plans of a comeback. She hasn't played a game since 2018. Yeah. And I guess all we have now is just the highlights and the clips and the memories of who was once an unstoppable player, truly.
You know what's funny? Maya Moore retirement is all the Maya Moore fans on Twitter that were posting like the screenshots of her sitting next to her husband talking about, I will never forgive this man for what he did to us. That I think was the best part of the jersey retirement, was just Jonathan Irons just getting.
That's been hilarious. No, that's been the funniest part through the whole thing. People are like over him. They're like, man, you took her away from us.
Imagine how, like, it's crazy, like how stacked her resume already is. Like, imagine how much crazier her resume. 6 finals appearances in 8 years, winning 4 chips, bro. Like, her resume would be even more crazy if not for Jonathan Irons. Apparently, that's WNBA Twitter. Apparently,
it is crazy to think that her legacy and her story and her accolades would have been even more than that had she kept going. I mean, that's why she's going to be in the GOAT conversation. She's in people's GOAT. There's a GOAT case there for her for sure, legitimately.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was cool. As of today, we found out that Angel Reese is launching her own show and podcast under Shaq's big podcast network, sponsored by Playmaker. And so I actually want to read. I took a screenshot of Angel's tweet from a few hours ago. Little Miss keeps a bag, makes y'all mad, stays in y'all bag. Never cared about what y'all say about her. Basketball player, model, businesswoman, broadcaster, influencer, and actress, etc. is starting her own podcast. I'm taking my voice back and clearing all the false narratives. I hope y'all ready. And I saw her video saying that they're bringing tea every Thursdays. The show starts on September 5th, if I have that right.
Yep.
Dropping on Thursdays. So I'm looking forward to that. And it speaks to what I've said about Angel, from the beginning over the last couple years as her name and her brand has grown, especially coming into the WNBA. Her fame and her influence is tied to her game and her personality. She's established a brand through, her personality off the court as well as her play on the court. And that has translated in what's been a really phenomenal rookie year for her. And she still has a ways to go, but she's been making history this year and has been dominant in some ways. So that's been cool to see. Another podcast, of course. I mean, once you get a podcast, that you're legit out here. But again, it speaks to where she's at now. I mean, only you got the Paul Georges and Draymond Greens and, JJ Redick was doing his thing and stuff. But these are a lot of the athletes that you've got. The Kelsey brothers, they've got the #1 sports podcast right now. These athletes are established, and it's cool to see someone as big as Angel. And she said in her video, she's bringing celebrities on. Like, she's going to really be able to kind of flex her, just her social muscles and her influence and her celebrity a little bit, show people, and obviously be able to clap back at people and do that. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So shout out to Angel Reese.
Absolutely.
That queen is doing her thing. Lastly, what went down, Flaugé dropped her music video with Lil Wayne.
Right.
Actually, I watched the video earlier, which was dope. I saw a clip of her talking about Kim Mulkey being in the video, how she was asking if she was joking if she was gonna get paid or whatever. She's like, Coach, if you don't get in this video, all the suicides I ran for you. If you don't get in this video right now. Yeah. So they got Kim's country self in the beginning of the video in the huddle talking and stuff. So that's been really cool to see. Flaugé, I mean, you see it's a superstar thing, but man, to see how big she's going on the entertainment side of things as an artist and still elevating and expanding as a basketball player, like really gonna be looked to as one of the key, top guards in the country next year. So yeah, it's really cool to see what she's doing. A video with Lil Wayne, like, I mean,
a song along with Lil Wayne.
College basketball player with a music video with Lil Wayne. I mean, come on, like, really think about that.
We're talking GOAT status, bro. We're talking GOAT status.
Come on, man. That's wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Me, man. I'm a numbers guy, and there's a lot of numbers that I saw over the past week or so that caught my eye. Firstly, not a number. The Lynx, the Sun, and the Liberty have all clinched their spots in the playoffs already. 3 spots punched, 5 spots left to go. The Dream, by the way, have found their leg. I'll talk about a little bit more on the tiers, but they found their legs. They're, I think, a game or half a game behind of that 8th spot. So they're kind of making a push to potentially make the playoffs. I'm glad that they're finally starting to come around. But on the numbers side of things, probably the biggest one is Tina Charles the other day became the second all-time leading scorer in league history. So shout out to Tina Charles. BG, I think either last night or the night before, 3rd player in league history with 800 blocks in her career. She did that the other night. Chelsea Gray made it up to, she was already in the top 10. She's now 8th all-time in assists. Dewana Bonner, by the way, has made a lot of history this year with just moving up on a lot of these rankings. She's now 10th all-time field goals made, and she's moved up to 9th all-time rebounds as well. So she's continuing to add on to her legacy. Camila Cardoso, it did come at the expense of the best player in the world, Asia Wilson, but Camila Cardoso's 5 blocks on Asia Wilson not only a career high for Camilla, that's also the most a single player has blocked Asia Wilson in a game in her career, which I thought was kind of interesting. Usually when we see Asia Wilson play up against former South Carolina players, especially South Carolina bigs, she usually gets her one up on them. But I think this is probably the first time that former South Carolina player did their big one on Asia Wilson. And then Nafisa Collier, bro, 27, 18, and 5 the other night on 73% shooting. She's the first player in WNBA history to have at least 25 points, 15 boards, and 5 assists on at least 70% shooting. No one in the history of the league has recorded those numbers. And then, of course, when we talk about the rookies, Caitlin Clark, 15 points, 5 assists. She's done that now 21 times this season. That's the most 15 and 5 games in WNBA history. And she's the fastest player and only rookie to record 500 points, at least 500 points and 200 assists in a single season. That is a record for her as well. And then, of course, Angel Reese, she had 3 straight 20 rebound games, 22 double-doubles. She's the only player in WNBA history to have 3 straight 20 rebound games. But something else I noticed, in the modern era, she and Ben Wallace are the only bigs in the history of basketball in the modern era to record that. The last person to do that, Wilt Chamberlain, back when he was averaging like 25 boards a night or whatever. And then, of course, she has 22 double-doubles. Her next double-double will break the record. I believe it's for most double-doubles in a single season. It might be the rookie double-double record. I didn't actually get that note. But I told Martin before the show that there was something specific with numbers that I wanted to talk about. And there's a specific point that I wanted to make. And that point is, I wholeheartedly believe, Martin, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I wholeheartedly believe we have reached the point now where tribalism could potentially ruin women's basketball. And what I mean by that is, and I felt the same way about wrestling 5 years ago when All Elite Wrestling started. There's this tribalism thing going on with the Caitlin Clark fans and the Angel Reese fans. And the Caitlin Clark fans, for the most part, have this opinion, it seems, where you can't acknowledge anyone else other than Caitlin Clark without it being hate towards Caitlin Clark. And you can't appreciate specifically Angel Reese because she's a big shooting 40-something% from the field, whereas Caitlin Clark is a guard shooting like 60-something% from inside. And I get all that. And there's a lot of people that'll sit up here and say, well, Angel Reese is her rebounds are fraudulent because she's grabbing half of her rebounds. Well, the reason I specifically wanted to point out the 20 rebounds consecutively is in those 3 games where she had 62 total rebounds, 10 of 62 were off of her own misses. So this idea that the only reason why Angel Reese is getting all of these rebounds is off her own misses, that's not true, because she just got 60 in like a 5-game span. Only 10 of them were off of her own misses. If you take those games away, if you take those rebounds away, right, and say she shouldn't be rebounding her own misses, she's still averaging over that 3-game stretch just about 17 rebounds per game, which is still unprecedented and is still ridiculous as a rookie to essentially be averaging 17 rebounds per game over a 3-game stretch. The other thing that's important to note is if you look at her entire rebounding numbers, which right now is slightly over 200, and you take away all of the offensive rebounds she has off her own misses from the entire season, which is only 53 out of her 200, she still has 152 total rebounds, which she would still lead the WNBA in averages, and she would still be second to Asia Wilson in total. So even if you take away all the rebounds she has off her own misses, she's still the second best rebounder in the WNBA. So I really want us to get off of this tribalism. I want us to get out of this idea that you can't appreciate Angel Reese without slighting Caitlin Clark, or in order to appreciate Caitlin Clark, you have to slight Angel Reese, because that's not the case. If you want to sit here and tell me, and and Martin and I have talked about it a couple of times, if you want to sit here and tell me that there are things about Angel Reese's game that she needs to improve, like her footwork and her shooting and her ability to stretch the floor, that's factual. And I'm not going to sit here, and Martin's not going to sit here. And if you want to be honest, no Angel Reese fan is going to sit here and tell you that that's not true. The issue is to minimize the historic nature of Angel Reese's season that she's having. Because again, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, she's on pace to set the record for the most rebounds per game average in a single season. She's actually at this point right now, Martin, thanks to the 3 consecutive games of 20 rebounds, she's actually on pace to potentially become the first player in the history of the league to have at least 500 rebounds in a game or in a season. We've never seen that before. So what we can't do is we can't continue to minimize Angel Reese simply because of us wanting to appreciate Caitlin Clark. We can't do that.
Yeah,
that's been my big takeaway from this week is I think that tribalism is potentially ruining a really, really, really great rookie campaign from two really good players. And to respond to this comment, I'm not really talking about one particular fan base. I'm talking about tribalism in general. Like whether you are a Caitlin Clark fan or an Angel Reese fan, we can appreciate both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I've been seeing a lot lately over the past week or so, a lot of it has to be Caitlin or it has to be Angel. And that's not the case. We can appreciate both players because both of them are doing great things. And both of them have room to improve. Because if you want to sit here and you want to talk about Angel Reese's poor shooting, I can sit here and I can talk about the fact that Caitlin Clark's on pace to set the record for most turnovers in a single season. So there are things that we can critique on both sides. Let's just again remember they're rookies, and let's just appreciate what we're working.
It's been longer than just a week. I mean, this has been going on for like a year now. And I think even to that comment, like I we've been doing this show. We're on the internet. We see a lot of responses and traffic and opinions and stuff. And I mean, there's no way to really actually gauge this and say this, for sure. But I mean, we do notice more of and I think there's a reason, which is part of what I want to start with. I think there is somewhat of a legitimate reason why, but I think the Caitlin fans are a little more because there is tribalism on both sides. And you mentioned the Caitlin and the Angel fans, but you emphasized the Caitlin fans who seem to want to put down Angel and her play. As opposed to vice versa, the Angel fans going at Caitlin, and it's coming both ways. But here's what I'll say. I think a big thing that is happening and has continued to happen is that a lot of not just Caitlin fans, but even basketball fans, people have wondered, like, think about it, bro. What Angel has done is historic, and it's extremely impressive. If you love and know the game of basketball, I mean, rebounding is one of the key components of basketball. Mm-hmm. Someone important, I think it was Pat Riley, said rebounding wins championships.
Yeah.
Angel Reese is the best rebounder in the league as a rookie. Yeah. That to be able to say that is highly impressive. If you watch the way she rebounds, you see an art to it. You see her athleticism, her quickness, her timing. She has a nose and a sense for the ball. She is truly a gifted rebounder. It's entertaining watching her rebound, I would even argue.
Sure.
I think the biggest kind of theme here is the aesthetic. I think a lot of people have wondered why Angel Reese is considered the same level of star as Caitlin Clark when Caitlin brings a different kind of aesthetic as a shooter, as a passer. She's just a little smoother, a little more polished. We can all agree, as you said, like Angel needs work. She's also still very raw.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something. And again, it's probably coming from more people who really tap into the game of basketball and can really communicate this effectively. But I think people do struggle with that. I think some people say it better than others and communicate it better than others. But I think it can turn into trying to say like, trying to emphasize how Angel is not on Caitlin's level as a basketball player because you're just looking at a completely different aesthetic in terms of how they play.
Yeah. And I think that makes perfect sense. And so again, like when we have these conversations of it doesn't have to be either or, like it doesn't have.
I mean, and the problem is that they're competitors and they're battling for Rookie of the Year right away. And so we're having it's going to continue this Team Caitlin versus Team Angel thing until they become teammates one day. Like I said, they need to just team up. It needs to happen. They're perfect for each other. It's weird because they're different positions, they're different styles, they're different, totally different people. Even like Caitlin Clark ain't starting no podcast anytime soon. She's not a personality in that way. And it goes back to what I had said before about Angel. It's her game and her personality because her game is flourishing. She's just getting started. And if you watch her again, her impact is undeniable. Mm-hmm. But she also has a personality off the court to go with it. So she's capitalizing on that.
Absolutely.
I did have one more what's new thing to point
Yeah.
out, which I think is absolutely worthy. I think you'll agree.
Mhm.
Even though they just lost to your Mystics, the Seattle Storm just picked up Gabby Williams.
They did.
Now
Welcome
that could
back,
be a
Gabby Williams.
game-changing pickup. Welcome back, Gabby
Welcome
Williams.
back.
If you saw what she did to us in the gold medal game, she gave us hell. And she seems to be in a different mode right now with her versatility, her defense, her playmaking. That could be a game-changing move for Seattle. That's something to watch out for.
It could be. I think Seattle is dropped down to 5th in the standings right now after the loss last night to the Mystics. But yeah, no, the Gabby Williams, like immediately made an impact in that game, like instantly. The steals, the defense, the motor, it was all there. But yeah, no, I agree. That is definitely something to look out for the Storm. I feel like the Storm, by the way, I'm going to talk about it in a second. I feel like they've kind of flown over flown under the radar a little bit this season.
I would say I feel
like that's on par with the Storm though. The past couple of years is they've been a pretty under radar team until they get to the postseason, and then they remind us why they are the Seattle Storm and why they won so many championships.
Yeah, I would say I said before the season, them and Phoenix, they were the two teams as potential dark horses to really watch out for because they made such big additions. And right now, it looks like Seattle should be probably taken a little more seriously. I think Phoenix just has a couple of holes. They're clearly talented, and they have like you still have to compete against them. But I think Seattle just a little more well-rounded. I think a little more balanced.
Yep.
And again, adding Gabby Williams, that's definitely something to look out for.
Absolutely. Well, brother, let's get into some tiers. I believe the last time I did this, there were 7 tiers. This week, there are 6. Last time I did this, I name dropped a draftee. This week, I've done it again. At the bottom, the Sparks, the Mystics, and the Wings. Kiki, as in Kiki Iriafen. Actually, happy belated birthday to Kiki Iriafen, by the way. She turned 21. Do you love me? That is what the Sparks, Mystics, and Wings are asking Kiki Iriafen right now. Quick note about the Mystics. The Mystics actually, thanks to a trade, have 2 shots at the number 1 overall pick because they have 2 picks in the top 3. They have their own pick. They also have Atlanta's pick. So the last time I did this, I name dropped Paige and said that Paige could end up in DC. There is a slight reality where the Mystics could have both Paige and Kiki Iriafen, which would be nuts considering just how early they are in this rebuild. They can come out 2 years with Paige, they can come out with Kiki, and they can come out also with Kiki Iriafen. I will say this too, though, about the Sparks. The Sparks, I think, are in a really tough spot, and they need to figure it out. And much to my surprise, it has to do with Kurt Miller. I watched a clip the other day on Twitter of Kurt Miller saying that Rickea Jackson needs to figure out how to close in the 4th quarter. But if you looked at the past couple of games that Rickea Jackson has played, she hasn't gotten a lot of time in the 4th quarter. So if you wanted to figure it out, Kurt, you should put her on the floor. Because Rickea Jackson post-break has honestly probably been the best player on the Sparks post-break. She's been nuts. She had an amazing game a couple nights ago. She had another, she's just, again, I've said it a lot going into the season, most efficient scorer in the draft, probably the best scorer in this draft. She's just continuing to prove that she needs to see the floor more. The Wings are really tough to gauge for me right now, and it's really annoying me because they're at the bottom of the rankings, and they have the game against the Sparks where they come back from down 22 and Enrique drops 33. But you look at the record and they suck because they missed Satu for the entire first chunk of the season. And you look at the rest of the season and there's really no hope for them. They're in that really weird spot where you can't really fully commit to a rebuild because there's too much talent on the team, but you don't want to not commit to a rebuild. And it's hard not to considering how low on the rankings there are. And also, by the way, I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, Satu Sabali is a free agent after this season. She only signed a 1-year deal in the offseason. That's also something to look out. So all 3 of these teams, could potentially be in the market for Kiki Iriafen. One level up, the Sky and the Dream. I alluded to it. The Dream post-break have closed the gap on the Sky. They're about a game or half a game behind the Sky for the 8th spot, the final spot in the playoffs. I'll be honest. I texted Martin a couple weeks ago and I said, I don't think the top 8 is going to change. And I thought that we could start doing playoff previews as soon as this week. That's not the case because the Dream have made it interesting. They've come alive. Ryan Howard is back and she's healthy and she's looking good. This team is starting to get it together. There are still concerns. I do have some coaching concerns with the way that some things are looking from time to time. I think that the game that they played against the Fever last night definitely should have and could have gone their way. And I think they let it get away from them early. So we'll have to figure it out. But the Dream have slowly inched themselves back into potential playoff consideration. The Aces, it pains me to put them here, but I feel like this is all smoke and mirrors. right? They started the season off struggling without Chelsea Gray, and it made perfect sense because they didn't have their point guard. They didn't have their facilitator, their best ball handler, their best playmaker. She comes back. They lose 2 games heading into the All-Star break. Post-All-Star break, post-Olympic break, this team has looked like they didn't look like how they looked when they didn't have Chelsea Gray, and I don't know what's going on. Now, I will say this. A'ja Wilson on Sunday, game winner against the Chicago Sky in a game that came down literally to the last 1.1 seconds. But it's hard for me as an Aces fan to know what exactly to expect come postseason time. They're going to make the playoffs, of course. They're essentially locked in. They have a couple more games they should win, but it would take an absolute catastrophe for them to not make the playoffs. I just don't know if I should have the faith that I had at the beginning of the season in this team to not even make it back to the finals, but just be competitive come postseason time. We'll talk about more of that in a second. The Mercury and the Fever are hanging in there. Martin talked a bit about the Mercury a little bit. They're kind of still trying to figuring it out. You would think at this point that they have it all figured out. It looks like they don't quite yet. But again, they're not in a position where you should be any concerned. And the Fever, they're also hanging in there. They're catching their stride. Kelsey Mitchell has been leading all scorers. I think she's at 29.3 points per game post-break. She's averaging the most points per game of all players post-Olympic break. The Fever, man, Sue Bird said it a couple weeks ago. We've kind of alluded to it a couple times on the show. I don't know if there's anyone that wants to play the Indiana Fever come postseason time. And also shout out to the Fever. For the first time since 2016, they've won at least 14 games in the season, and there's still 10 games left, so they could potentially crack 20. The Storm and the Sun are tough competition. We talked about Gabby Williams returning to Seattle. This is a team I think has flown onto the radar. I think, in my opinion at least, they have slightly underperformed. I think they would have 100% been, or I expect them at least to 100% be a top 3, top 4 team in the league consistently and like obviously, and it hasn't always looked like that. The Sun obviously are always going to be a tough team. Dejanay Carrington is not only a most improved player candidate, but also a defensive player of the year candidate. We know what we're getting from DeWanna Bonner. We know what we're getting from Alyssa Thomas. Marina Mabry is there, and they're trying to figure out what she needs to do on this team to be successful, to compete for a championship. Stephanie White, I think, is in the running for Coach of the Year. She won the award last year. She could potentially win the award this year. I don't think she will, but she has a strong case. And the eye is on the prize. I'm going to say it right now. I think this is our finals matchup this year. I think we're going to see the Liberty and the Lynx in the finals this year. I love what I'm seeing from the Liberty, and it pains me to say that as a fan of a team that I watched send the Liberty home on their own floor in the finals. Sabrina Ionescu, who we talked about a couple weeks ago as being a most improved candidate. Cheryl Swoops has said it. A lot of other people have said it. Sabrina has been undeniably the best guard in the league this season, answered the call that Martin Soris put out on our first show of the season, asking for a big year for Sabrina. She has given us all that and then some. And then Nafisa Collier and the Minnesota Lynx. Like, I don't know what else is there that we can say about this team that we haven't said already. Fee is an MVP candidate. Kayla McBride has been, bar none, the second best player on this team, and it hasn't even really been close. You still have Diamond Miller. You still have Courtney Williams, who I got to see for the first time live with my own 2 eyes in person when they were here to play the Mystics, and I was absolutely dumbfounded at what I was watching. I couldn't believe my eyes. That's how great and how impactful she is on the basketball court. I am calling my shot right now that this will be the 2024 WNBA Finals matchup, and that is the Tiers, the 5th edition of the Tiers for this season.
I like it. I think the best tiers yet so far. A few thoughts. Very, very interesting. Interesting and honest assessment on your Aces, I think, right now. But I would have at least put them in hanging in there. Because I think that win against Chicago, I think if you got to watch that game, you had to be in
Probably.
church.
I had to be at church. Yeah,
you didn't. Right. Yeah, you had to be in. It was Sunday. You had to, Marcus is a faithful church representative. He's on videos and has to appear at conferences. He's an important person in the church. So it was Sunday. I have fulfilled my duties as a PK, 30 years of service. So Sundays are now mine. And so I got to watch most of that game, if not all of that Chicago and Vegas game on Sunday. And I was texting you towards the end when stuff was going on. But they mentioned on the broadcast how Becky Hammon has been looking for, I forget the exact term they used, but it was like a turning point or a catalytic moment or a spark, something that she's been talking about to see from the team this season. And I saw them battle through that game. Chicago was up 10 with like 2.5 minutes left. And I saw Vegas really battle, and everyone had to chip in. Chelsea Gray had to hit a couple shots. Kelsey Plum had to have moments. And Asia had the game winner. So I think we could be seeing, because what I said before was that I think Vegas we won't see their best until the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so I think smoke and mirrors is fair and honest, because their defense really hasn't been good. Asia has talked about it publicly. They've had some challenges. They haven't looked dominant and unbeatable like they have in the past. But I still, having seen certain stretches now, I'm like, I think we're seeing them get ready to be at the level that they need to be when the time is right. They'll still be formidable. It's quite the prediction to say it's going to be Liberty and Lynx in the finals. I think that's fair. Matchups should be interesting, come playoff time. But Minnesota is legit. I mean, my prediction at the start of the season was that we're going to have Liberty and Aces again. But Minnesota is definitely.
I was right there with you. I think the big thing for me is what has me on the smoke and mirrors, and what has me leaning on that Liberty Lynx matchup is if you look at the Aces record in their season series versus the Lynx and the Liberty, we've played both of those teams a combined 8 or 9 times. We've won 2 games. So there is something there, and I know a couple of those games came before, while Chelsea Gray was out, and so you take those with a grain of salt. But even with most of those games have been with Chelsea Gray being here, and so for me, it's just it's a matchup thing for me. And to your point, with the defense not being where we expect it to be, when you have the best player in the world who's an exceptional two-way player, you have a Kia Stokes who A'ja Wilson has credited time and time again as being her anchor mate down there, and why that defense runs the way it does. Like Jackie Young has even taken a step back defensively as well on the perimeter out there, which has also been a major concern. Like that's my big thing. Like I'm still holding out hope because I know what this team can be, but based on if I'm taking away what I saw in 2022 when we won the first one, if I'm taking away all that I saw last year when we won the second one, if we're just talking about from May 15th to August 27th, this 3.5 months of basketball, it's tough for me even as a fan. And I want to because it's my team, but it's tough for me even as a fan to objectively say we can make it to the finals, because in order to get to the finals with the way the bracket is set up right now, we'd have to go through the Lynx because we're on that side. If we move up, guess what? We got to meet the Liberty before the finals. So we have to see one of those teams. There is no scenario, I think, at this point mathematically, where the Liberty and the Lynx end up on the same side. The Lynx would have to lose games and drop to 3 in order for that to happen. And with the way they're clicking right now, they're not dropping to 3. So we have to go through both of those teams to three-peat. And that's what the concern for me is right now as a fan. I didn't mean to cut your response off there. I just wanted
No, you're good. That's legit. I will say to that point, I think Jackie Young is going to be the key to getting the three-peat. If I had to point at one person in particular, I think if Jackie Young turns up, that's going to be the difference, and they may need that. I also could have put Indiana in tough competition at this point. I think they've proven they only have 2 less wins than Vegas. They're in the playoff picture. I still think that Chicago may have handed Connecticut a legitimate shot at the title. Connecticut could disrupt things too. Marina Mabry, to me, is the biggest move of the season. I think that was a huge ad for them. I didn't realize that Chicago got Rachel Banham back, which is great because she can actually shoot the ball. And Chicago's still going to compete. Lindsay Allen is stepping up at the guard position. It is nice to see a more defined lead guard role for Kennedy Carter now with Marina out of there. But I just think Connecticut's potential, I see them completely differently now with Marina in there. And she seems to be doing just fine, still able to do her thing and contribute to winning. So I could have seen Indiana in tough competition. I think they're starting to earn that. To your point, people don't want to play them. I think they're hitting their stride a little bit. So I still think that they're improving. Like they'll still dip off. Like, they're right there, but I think that's fair to have them hanging in there, but I could have seen them in tough competition. On the bottom tier for Kiki, I do think, going back to our conversation from, when we thought Paige might be in this year's draft, when we were debating about who should go 1-2 Cam and who the Sparks should go with between Cam and Paige.
Right.
I think out of those three teams, Dallas should be the main team that is really eyeing Kiki.
Yeah.
I think they could really use an elite big down
Yeah.
there, a young elite big down there.
Absolutely.
I feel like LA and DC should be eyeing Paige. I think both of them would be very suited to have like a productive, skilled guard who can hit shots like Paige, who can make plays.
Mhm.
I'm back on the Paige train for LA, but
Yeah.
I think just looking ahead again, when you said Kiki, I'm like, we are going to have some discussions about who will be number one, number two, what team should be going for. Out of those three teams, I'm thinking like, man, I think Dallas for me would probably be the best for Kiki.
So the interesting thing is again, I mentioned the Mystics have what would be the Dreams pick as well. So they'll have 2 picks in the top 4. Because the Mystics have been winning games, if you check the lottery odds now, the Sparks do now have, and I talk about this, I think it was after the draft. I can't remember who's on the show. I think Chaz was on the show. We were talking about it very briefly, and he had said, whoever it was had said, and this is how you know that like the people who do lottery odds don't really know basketball, for thinking that LA could have the number 1 pick, and now here we are. They do actually lead the odds right now for the number 1 pick, and the Mystics have a shot at 2 and 3. So expecting the Sparks to take Paige at number 1, obviously that does open the door for Kiki to potentially go 2 or 3 to the Mystics, but it gives the Mystics a great opportunity because there's still other guards in this draft that are going to come out that they can still take. I think that'll be perfectly capable of being a lead guard. Maybe Georgia Amore. I think whoever doesn't go 1 is going to be the guard that goes to whoever doesn't get paid. I think is that she'll be the second guard off the board. But again, that's getting ahead of ourselves. We got to get the lottery and all that stuff. But your point about Kiki Iriafen in Dallas is an interesting one. That's definitely something that'd be interesting to see her out there on the floor with Asatu if she signs to come back. And of course, Enrique Agumbwale. That would be a very interesting, 3 that you have there on the floor. Of course, still having all the pieces that you have around them to continue. The one thing I did see on Twitter before we move on to the Aces segment a little bit more is I saw someone make a great point about how if the Wings do get the first pick, it'll be interesting to see if they take Paige, because the Wings don't actually have the best history of either developing good guards or keeping good guards. Like they've had some good guards who've in their role and they've let go. They've had, or who they've traded away. They've had others who developed into good guards and then they just let walk out the front door. So it will be interesting to see if they, kind of like what I was talking about earlier, or, around this time of the draft, of like taking the best player because of the best player versus taking the best player that fits on your team. I think we could see that conversation rise up again, depending on which of those 3 teams end up with the first overall pick, because Paige is a generational talent, but does Paige fit in Dallas? And then more importantly, does Dallas actually have what it takes to, to make sure that Paige's game can translate to the next level and then keep her in Dallas? Because they don't have the history of, other than Enrique, they don't really have a great history of keeping their guards that they do develop that turn into stars. And
it's about her fit with Enrique. I mean, it's about how they feel about how does she play with Enrique. I could see it. Right. I mean, Enrique is a hybrid guard. You don't really need her playing point. Paige could be more of that point who can also score. And she may be the best player available on the board. If it's Dallas at number 1, they should not overthink that. They should definitely go with Paige. And that would be great to see Enrique get to play with a guard who's like, who they're invested in, to your point, who can they can actually keep around and develop, who's another face of the franchise and who can play the way that Paige plays. I mean, I think that would be fun to watch.
Yeah, I think so as well. So let's go back to the Aces for a second. I wanted to ask you this question, and I wanted to just get it out there. And I have a feeling what you're going to say, but I do want to ask, because I think it's definitely a conversation worth having, right? We all know the Aces have a shot at history, a three-peat. It would be the first three-peat since the Comets did it in the first 3 years of the league's existence. If you had to assess right now who the biggest threat to the Aces shot at history, the shot at the three-peat, which team right now would you say is their biggest threat?
I think it's New York. I think Minnesota does present like they're legit. They match up with Vegas pretty well. I think with Minnesota, it's like their size, man. Like they've got big players at at different positions, especially in the forward spots. And I think that bothers Vegas because their bigs are also versatile, starting with Nafisa. But I mean, look, I think the 4 teams at the top of your tiers in the first 2 rows, tough competition, and the top 2 with New York and Minnesota. I think any of those teams right now, Seattle, Connecticut, New York, and Minnesota, I think are 4 legit teams that would give us a classic playoff series against the Aces right now. If I had to pick one team, I just think it's New York because they're a little used to them. I think New York is very hungry right now, having lost in the finals last year. So I would say New York, but Minnesota matchup wise is looking to be really tough for anybody. Seattle is the dark horse right now, and Connecticut is Connecticut. So I just all 4 of those teams make me think like that's all competition.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. As it stands right now, as I mentioned earlier, right, the Liberty, the Sun, and the Lynx have all punched their tickets into the playoffs. If the playoffs were to start tomorrow, the Aces are the 4 seed. They would have to play the Storm in the first round, a team that they are very familiar with, a team that they've seen, I believe, in each of the last 3 or 4 postseasons. At some point, they have played the Seattle Storm. We played them last year and I think the year before. So there's definitely some familiarity there. On the same side of the bracket with them, as I mentioned earlier, is the New York Liberty. They would see the Liberty in the second round of the playoffs. They'd have to get through the Liberty to even get back to the finals. On the other side waiting for them would either be the Connecticut Sun or the Minnesota Lynx, whoever gets out of there. So it is a tough road. I'm going to be honest, and this might be a cop-out answer. I think the biggest threat to the Aces three-peating is the Las Vegas Aces, for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier in the smoke and mirrors part of the tiers. The best player in the world right now, A'ja Wilson, she's so focused on basketball right now and just winning games. She's not even dressing up anymore. She just got a pack of white tees in her car that she just puts on with some sweats and calls it a day. But like, in all seriousness, the thing that brought the Aces to the dance has been defense. And it hasn't just been defense by A'ja Wilson. It's been team defense. Like, I don't know, aside from the Connecticut Storm, aside from the Connecticut Sun, I don't know if there's been a team over the last 2 or 3 years that you can say definitively has been a better team defense than the Las Vegas Aces, because they've been anchored defensively, not just by A'ja. Yeah, Asia's had the awards for it and she has the stats to go with it, but A'ja will be the first to tell you, and she said it on multiple occasions. She said it last year when she got the award, that Kia Stokes plays a big part in her ability to be as impactful as she is defensively down low. Kia Stokes has not been playing that great defensively. I mentioned Jackie Young as well, and you talked about Jackie Young being the X factor. My immediate reaction after game 1 of the finals last year was, if Jackie Young continues to play the way that she played in game 1, she could win the finals MVP, because that's how good Jackie Young is on both sides of the ball. And she hasn't been that so far post-break, and really throughout the duration of the entire season, if we're being honest. The Las Vegas Aces have the talent on the roster, 1 through 12, to get back to and win the finals for the 3rd consecutive season. I don't know what's not clicking right now, because we've seen stretches when the Aces have been dominant and look like their old selves, and we've seen stretches where the Aces look like they have no idea what's going on and there's no chemistry whatsoever. And I'm not sure if this is a lull from the Olympic break. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if this is because your 4 best players were out in Paris, winning basketball for name and for country, and everyone else just wasn't doing anything. I don't know. But again, they were on smoke and mirrors, because I don't know what to make of a tight game against Chicago. Like, do I recognize the talent that is the Chicago Sky? Absolutely. Do I recognize the growth that the Chicago Sky have made, not just from season to season comparative to last year, but from on a night-to-night basis of Kennedy Carter's comfort in her role and Angel Reese's comfort in her role and seeing Camilla out there? Absolutely. But am I also not going to sit here and act like the Aces shouldn't have not had to come down to the last 1.1 seconds to win that game? Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I wasn't shocked by that. So I have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of concerns about the Aces right now. And trust me, my prediction right now is Liberty Lynx, because I think that's what's making the most sense right now based on what we're seeing. But believe me, I'm hoping that the Aces can get back to what we've seen. I'm hoping that their best is yet to come postseason time. And the one thing I will say is, when you look at a lot of these teams that are here, the Liberty have been here before, right? The Storm have been here before, and the Sun have been here before, of all the teams in the playoffs right now. The Lynx, as great as they are, they haven't been in recently in this situation where you have the expectations that they have to potentially compete for and win a championship. This is the first time it's been in a while. When you look at other teams in the mix, Phoenix, yeah, they're the Phoenix Mercury, but again, over the past couple of seasons, we haven't had championship expectations of the Mercury. And not to say that we have them right now, but I don't think anyone would bat an eye if we looked up and saw the Phoenix Mercury competing for a championship because of the talent that they brought in and how they're still working it out. And no one's really concerned about the Fever or the Sky making the finals either, and the Dream either. But like what the Aces have that most of the field don't have is the championship experience. And so I know it's kind of cliche to say that they're going to lean on that and they have the advantage, but right now as a fan, like that's what I have to lean on.
They know how to win games, man. They know how to win tough games.
Is that championship experience is just going to come out. It's going to ooze through their pores, and we're going to see the Aces that we've been accustomed to seeing the past 2 years. But I have concerns, like genuine concerns, where I couldn't even as a fan in my right mind say, "Oh yeah, we're good. The Aces are going to threepeat."
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, you amended, but I mean, I don't think we have to eulogize them. I don't think you have to eulogize them. I think the concerns are legitimate, but they're not. It's not going to look like the last 2 years. I think what we're seeing now, whether they win or lose, every game in these playoff series is probably going to be tough. They're not dominating teams like Chicago, who are. I mean, these teams are getting younger, better, more skilled, and they are in their third round at it, and so you have to give them a little bit of grace. Yeah. They still lead the league in scoring. They're still top 5 in rebounding. They're down on defense, I think, is really their biggest thing. But I see that as something that they will start to tighten up on when the time comes, because we've seen them do it. And at the end of the day, they still have a big 4. They know how to win games. If they're motivated enough, I'm not saying that it's a guarantee they're in the finals and they're going to win in three-peat. It's going to be difficult. Take it from a Kobe Lakers fan who tried to watch his team three-peat but knew it wasn't going to happen, and we had to run into Dallas just running around, JJ Barea and Jason Kidd and Jason Terry running around just hitting threes, and it was just Dirk's time to shine. I hate when you put up these comments while I'm in the middle of talking, so I can't actually read the comment. Like, your timing is just it's just remarkable. Some Aces fans are predicting whether they win or lose. Yeah, but again, it's hard to be a fan of a team that's trying to three-peat. I wanted to read the comment and it's gone. Some Aces fans are predicting whether they win or lose that the team will get broken up in the offseason. Do y'all see that as likely or not? See, that's a good question. I want to be able to read that. I think that's always on the table. Personally, I don't know where contracts are and stuff, but that is going to be something to watch. I do think if they lose, this seems like the type of group that's going to want to come back and maybe even recruit, because remember, they lost out on having Candace Parker for the run last year, even though they still won it, but they could have had her this year to go for the three-peat. She chose to retire. So maybe they feel like they could still recruit another piece, maybe beef up a little bit more. So I think they'll probably stick together. It's going to be an interesting offseason, but I think they could look to recruit another key talent.
Jackie Young, Asia Wilson, Kirsten Bell, who should be gone, Kia Stokes, and Megan Gustafson are all here until 2025. Kelsey Plum, Alicia Clark, Tiffany Hayes, Sydney Colson, who I love Sid. She should also be gone. Are all the players that are...
You can't get rid of Sid. I'm not going to lie. You can't get rid of Sid.
But like...
You kind of can't get rid of Sid. If you absolutely have to, of course you do it, but that's more than just basketball at this point.
It is. It's 100% more than basketball. I know, but get rid of Sid. I love Sid though. The only players, right? I think the most important piece of the puzzle right now that's out for a contract at the end of this season is Kelsey Plum. So, and I don't think Kelsey Plum is going anywhere. I think the only player that we could potentially look at and have a serious conversation about if she's leaving is Chelsea Gray. And that's only because the Golden State team now exists. She's from the Bay. And I could potentially imagine a scenario where she would like to play for that team before she calls it quits. I think that's the only piece of the puzzle that could potentially leave. I don't think Kelsey Plum is going anywhere. Yes, Jackie Young signed a 2-year extension. Thank you.
Okay.
My camera went out. My bad. Jackie Young signed a 2-year extension. It expires at the end of next season. So she will be here through the 2024-2025 season as well. So, yeah, I think the only piece of this puzzle that could potentially leave and move on is Chelsea Gray, because she's getting up there, and she might want to say, I want to go play for the Valkyries, maybe compete for a championship for my hometown team before I hang it up. That's the only one. I don't think Asia is going anywhere. I think she's in Vegas for life. I don't think Jackie Young is going anywhere either, at least not anytime soon. I think she'd probably be here forever as well. Kelsey Plum will likely get extended in the offseason as well, and so she'll be here for another 2, 3, 4 years, however long, so that's good.
Yeah, I don't know if we have the clip, but I mentioned about them needing the guards got to step up.
So let's play that clip, and then we'll get into MVP.
What takes the Aces over the top is the guard play, and there's been so much focus on Asia and how historically great she is, and she has been. But sometimes when one starts to elevate even more, it's like if the others aren't going to that level too, it's like you forget, like you need, Jackie, Kelsey, and Chelsea, we're all getting 20, 25. I mean, big time games consistently, scoring the ball from the perimeter, which made them just impossible to stop.
Hopefully the guards can get it together. We can go back to seeing some unstoppable Aces basketball. Martin, stories with the floundering of the Aces, the emergence post-break of Caitlin Clark, the dominance of Nafisa Collier, and the consistency of other players across the league. It seems like this MVP conversation has not been as unanimous as most people believe, and it's ruffled some feathers on Twitter. If you had a vote for MVP and you were casting your vote right now, who is the MVP of the WNBA this season?
It's Asia Wilson still right now. I mean, that's not really a debate. I still don't think. I think the only reason why it's become more of a conversation is obviously because going back to your concerns about your team, the Aces are not dominating. They're not the top team in the league, but they're still top 5. They're only a few wins, away from the top team, New York and Minnesota. Like they're still right there. So I think Vegas having 18 wins, being 18-11, top 5, whatever, and Asia having the historic season that she's having still adds up to her being the MVP. I mean, there's a conversation just because the team isn't the best team and is as dominant as we've seen. So there's a conversation. I've said before on here, the only person I'm entertaining in a conversation is Nafisa Collier because her team is dominant and has been one of the top teams in the league. I don't know how you I mean, come on. We just went through it. We got but yeah, that's it is ludicrous to me that people think Clark is a candidate for MVP. I don't think it's ludicrous because I think she's making a case for first team all WNBA. And if Indiana continues to improve, again, they're only 2 wins back from Vegas. What Indiana's doing is very impressive, and Caitlin is making history too. I don't think it's ludicrous. I just don't think that it's a conversation. Again, the only person I think is a conversation realistically to be MVP aside from Asia Wilson is Nafisa Collier when you look at her team success and her individual success this season.
Does Sabrina get weight there though too? Because they're at the top.
Yes. No. Yeah. She's in my top 5. She would probably be number 3. Sabrina's been incredible this season, and it's crazy that it's her, and not that it's crazy, but it is her, and it's not Stewie, and it's not John Quell. It definitely would be Sabrina up for that. I would say too. Yeah.
So yeah, I agree, and I think for me the big thing, and I sent you the tweets as soon as I started seeing them roll in. It was after Caitlin had like 29 and 12 or something like that when people were saying Caitlin for MVP. This isn't a conversation. Like there's only one person that can make this a conversation. It's Nafisa Collier. If the Aces continue to struggle and they don't right the ship, and they have a game tonight against Dallas, and so we'll see if that game winner on Sunday is that catalyst that Becky Hammon was looking for. Nafisa Collier would be the MVP. And honestly, I'll be honest, even though it should be Asia Wilson, if somehow Nafisa wins it this season, I wouldn't be upset because she's been having the best year of her career this year. But all that being said, though, it's still Asia. The Caitlin Clark push for MVP, I think, is founded a lot more in the notion that there's a lot of Caitlin Clark fans that expected her to come in and win MVP and be the best thing since sliced bread, and not actually based in any facts based on how the season is going. Because as great as Caitlin Clark has been this season, they still have a losing record. And I don't think there's anywhere ever in any sport where an MVP has been named MVP and their team had a losing record. So the prerequisite for Caitlin Clark even to actually have a legit argument is let's get to 500 at least to even have a legitimate threat at the top two. I do think Asia should win the award. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. When you are a player that has the potential to do something that no one else has done before, like score 1,000 points and be the first player in WNBA history to average 25 for a season. She's on pace to average 27. That warrants being the MVP. And so the only player that can outdo that, and I talked about this weeks and weeks ago, we talked about how historic and how nuts it is and how wide the gap is between Asia and the second best player, even though it's not a super wide gap, but comparatively to the gap between like 2 and 5, it's a pretty wide gap. In order to compete with Asia Wilson and the historic thing that she's doing, you have to also do things historic. There's one other player with wins on their side who's been doing things at a historic rate. It's Nafisa Collier. She has had a historic season in her own right. She's done a lot of things this season that have been historic. I just mentioned one earlier at the top of the show, 27, 18, and 5 on 73% shooting, the only player in WNBA history to record those types of numbers. If Caitlin Clark's team were, if the Fever were winning more games, like if they had 20-something wins or somewhere around there, I couldn't sit here and tell you that there's not a conversation. I couldn't sit here and say that. My thing is they have a losing record. They're not winning. Like they're not winning enough compared to the other players that are in the conversation. That's the only thing. Win more games, you have the conversation. There's no MVP ever that has not that has won MVP with a losing record. You got to win to even be in the conversation. I mean, again, to Asia, like even on like nights when like she's not average, like when she's not dropping like 27 and 15, whatever, like she's still giving you at least 20 and 10. Like she's still doing that, right? So again, despite the fact that her team is not playing well as a whole, she is still doing what we expect Asia Wilson to do on a night in, night out basis. Being the fourth best team in the conference or in the league doesn't mean you're not MVP. In fact, I think when she won the award, when she won MVP the first time in 2020, they weren't the number one team or even the number two team, I think, in 2020. I have to check it. They were like 3 or 4 as well. So, and we've seen that before. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. It's, for me, I know we talk about this in our messages. For me, I would go Asia. I would go Nafisa. I would go Sabrina. I would put Caitlin slightly ahead of a Kalia Copper for MVP at 4 and 5 is how I would rank it. Just because, again, Kalia Copper has been playing. She's kind of simmered off a bit. So I would give the edge to Caitlin because Caitlin's season has been more historic despite the fact that they don't have as many wins. I think it's like a 1 or 2 game difference on the win total.
Yeah, it's only a couple games.
If the Aces continue to struggle and Nafisa continues to be dominant individually and continues to lift the links, I could see Nafisa Collier winning the award and I wouldn't have an issue. But right now, it's still Asia Wilson, unless something catastrophic happens
the Aces would have to fall off a cliff. I don't even think it's about them and not what other people do. I mean, if Caitlin and the Fever start going crazy, sure, then she'll be more in the running. Same thing with Nafisa. If Nafisa really keeps kicking up and they really just become dominant going into the playoffs, maybe she does win it. But they would have to do that, and the Aces and Asia would have to fall off a cliff and not be as effective. So it should be interesting. It could become more of a conversation, but like I said, the Caitlin thing, what is an interesting conversation is if she'll make first team all WNBA, because she's making a real argument for that now.
So that's a great question. With it being positionless, I know that we did our predictions, and I think when we did our predictions, we put her on second team heading into the break. I mean, 2 weeks.
I think that's still reasonable to think, because even though it's positionless, you're still probably going to see. I mean, it's Asia.
You're still going to have Asia, Sabrina's
going to get in there.
Stewie and Nafisa for sure.
Stewie and Nafisa for sure. And then, I mean, you're looking at like Kalia Copper could get in there.
I think that fifth spot
could make a case. That fifth spot is going to be an argument. It's going to be.
It'll probably that fifth spot will go to Caitlin, or I mean, I know her team's not winning, but like Arike still is. Right. He still has a legitimate crack at first team all WNBA as well. So, but you're right. Caitlin certainly does have a case for first team WNBA. Caitlin might win MVP next year. I mean, just
She might.
She might.
She could. And Kelsey Mitchell is another interesting free agent. We got to see what she really wants to do there.
Yeah.
I've talked about what I kind of felt like, what I liked, and kind of and not feeling too much about her and Caitlin as a backcourt pairing, but they certainly do help each other out a lot. Kelsey Mitchell is a great pressure release off of Caitlin to be the quick scoring guard and add scoring to what Indiana can do.
This is why I hate myself. I'm just going to have to send it to you. I saw something right before we went live on the show about that point that you were making about how Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark feed off of each other and they look great. And it was someone in like a WNBA group I'm in Facebook comparing this backcourt to the Cappy DT backcourt from when they were together and explaining essentially the point that the post was making was like, Cappy Pondexter was a great player, had a great season. Diana Taurasi was a great player, had a great season. Both players were great individually before they came together. It doesn't necessarily mean that the presence of one made the other one better and they weren't good before. Essentially is the point they were making in reference to Caitlin Clark's presence on the Fever, specifically as it relates to Kelsey Mitchell, because Kelsey Mitchell, as I mentioned, has been going nuts post-break. And it was a really great post. I'm going to find it and send it to you because I know that we talked about Cappy and DT on the show a couple months ago when we were talking about Kalia Copper being in Phoenix and what that looked like for her and DT. So I'll find that and send it to you, but I thought that was interesting. And I think it's a great point, again, going back to the tribalism from the beginning of the show. Like, these players were good before Caitlin got there. Caitlin made the team better, not necessarily making these one individual players better. And that parallel I thought was a good one. I thought it was something you could certainly relate to because
that's an interesting comparison. The big difference in dynamics in the sense that Caitlin would be the Diana, but they drafted Caitlin and Phoenix drafted Cappy. Mm-hmm. And so they came together as a duo, but the dynamics in terms of on the court are very comparable, actually, very comparable. That's actually, now that that makes me like the duo more. And I mean, my point was that I felt like Caitlin needed a more of like a Klay Thompson 3-point shooting mover spacer duo backcourt mate type of person. I love Kelsey Mitchell and what she does, and I think she helps Caitlin a lot with the things that she does well. Mm-hmm. But in terms of styles and how they feed off each other, I just felt like maybe. But the one thing they do have in common is their pace. Kelsey and Caitlin. I mean, I've always said people sleep on Caitlin's pace and how she pushes that ball, man. People don't want to run with her, but Kelsey Mitchell wants to run, and she's about speed and pace. And so that works with them. And that's a similarity to the Cappy and Diana duo and how that Phoenix Mercury team like to play. So that is very interesting.
Before we go, it's time to give the people or tell the people who will be joining us on Protect Our Queens next week. As Martin Sori said at the beginning of the show, the countdown to the 1 year show is officially on. The 1 year show will be live right here on the Give a Shot Network at 7 p.m. Eastern, September 17th.
9/17, baby.
9/17, which is 2 days before the regular season ends. So last year, we started the show the night before the playoffs started. This year, we are celebrating a year 2 nights before the regular season ends. So to have a similar feel times 100. We got a lot of cool stuff for you. Yeah. The countdown is on. We have 3 guests confirmed for our next 3 shows, which is amazing. Yes. And the guest on the show next week is none other than Nick Andre, who is a writer and an analyst, covers all things basketball. He's the host of For the Love of the Game, Best Damn W Show, and Believe in FSU Basketball. He also writes for Fansided, Chop Chat, Team in NBS Media, and The Lion's Den. So Nick Andre, who is an amazing presence in the community, especially on Twitter with just his thoughts and his opinions and his takes and his jokes from time to time in the world of women's basketball, will be joining us on the show. So make sure you guys tap in with us next week, 7 p.m., same time, same place, with Nick Andre joining Protect Our Queens. I can't wait. I know Martin's excited, and I'm sure that Nick is excited as well. We can't wait to have Nick.
Definitely excited, man. It's going to be a good one next week. Nick is he's taking some heat on Twitter. He's been trolling some trolls himself too. So I know he's going to have some stuff to share. And our next couple guests coming up before the 1 year show on 9/17. We've got some really good guests, some really dope people, some really important people, and we do have a very, very special guest coming through. She is confirmed for the 1 year show. We can't wait to announce that as well.
She is. So please make sure you guys tap in with us next week, because next week, at the end of next week's show, we will announce our guest for the following week, because we have all that stuff lined up already. Because when you are here to celebrate a year, you got to come correct and you have to be prepared. And so the countdown is on. As Martin loves to say at the top of every show, it is our motto. It is like our anthem, so to speak. I'm going to say it one more time. If you don't like women's basketball, this is not the place for you. If you're interested in women's basketball, this is the place for you. If you're intrigued, if you love it, this is the place for you. Give us a like, subscribe to the network, follow us on socials at @ProtectOurQueens_ on just about everything, and make sure that you are tapped in with us at all times, because the countdown is on, and we are going to be continuing to push full speed ahead to 9/17 at 7 p.m. So for my guy, Martin Soares of Basketball Society, this is Marcus of the Protect Our Queens podcast. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys go enjoy yourselves some women's basketball.